Welcome, everybody, to episode number 208 of NoCoders Office Hours. I'm your host, Tanya, and we're here with members Thomas and Kelly, and my partner here, Cameron. We're going to get started in just a moment. But before we do, if this is the first time you're tuning into Office Hours, we do this 6 times per week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m. Pacific time, Tuesday and Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And then Mondays, we have a second session that happens at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you'd like to join us so that you can ask any bubble questions that you want on office hours, you can go and sign up at pronocoders.com. Welcome, everyone. How's your day? Things going okay?
Struggling a little.
Just trying to get the project done, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Just it won't end. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the one thing. If we can fix this, we're done.
Then we're done. Okay. Well, let's get on it. Let's finish it. First, let me just check in. Thomas was here first. Thomas, did you have anything to start? I don't think he does.
Nope, I'm good. Sorry.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Let's go for it, Kelly.
Okay. So might I share my screen? I have to.
Yes, please. Take it on over.
All right. So I am building an app for a client, and it involves many complicated calculations. So I will. Sorry, apologies. I should have opened this up beforehand. So the idea is that it's for startup. The audience is startup professionals. And the idea is that your colleagues can leave reviews of you at like your working style and such, right? Okay. So let's do this. So this is what your typical profile looks like. And you can see here, there's a graph. So this graph is calculated from what we call takes. So a take is when someone leaves a review for you. So you can see that Kelsey has 2 takes, right? So if I want to view a take, it's here. And the take, it's a long process for a take. It's 8 steps. And one of the steps is to select from a list my strengths, right? So, and I rank them in order. The thing I'm strongest at to another thing I'm very strong at, but it's the last in a list of 5, right? So these are ranked and they are weighted, okay, when we get to the graph. Then there's areas for growth, which we call improvements. So strengths, improvements. They're the same list that we're pulling from, okay? But these are just things I need to get better at, right? So you can see on this take, the person didn't fill out any improvements. There would always be at least one. This is just a sample one. And then working style, these are character traits. We can ignore this because it does not factor into the graph. These are the 2 things that factor into the graph, okay? So if I go back to the profile and I look at the graph, this is an aggregate. Sorry, this page is heavy. This is an aggregate of colleagues' takes. If other people make takes of me. Now I am supposed to make my own take of myself. So if I click on that, you see the graph changes. And this has like my own take and how I've ranked myself. Okay. So, all right. Clear? Everything's clear so far.
Gotcha.
Yep. All right. So this, whenever I looked at the takes, this list of things, this is an option set called competencies, okay? Everything in these 2 fields right here. Competencies is a single option set. The competencies are connected to a category. So each competency falls into one of 5 categories, okay? The categories are what we're plotting on the graph. So the reason why team player is ranked really high is because my coworkers have selected the competencies under that category as strengths. Now, initiative is lower because they might have selected those as weaknesses or improvements. Okay, fair? Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the way that I'm calculating this is first, when a user is created, let me just step back a second. So the numbers that are pulling into this graph are coming from a single data type called sum categories. Some as in like the sum of something, of many things, categories, because that's what these are, right? So I have to populate that data type with data, right? So here's how I've done this. When we create a new user, it's a backend workflow. I run a single backend workflow that triggers three backend workflows. Okay. So the first thing is I'm creating a number of some category records. So there are 5 categories. A user is going to have 1 record per category, okay, in the some categories. And that is for colleague takes. So we're going to aggregate all the data for all of my colleagues' takes in one of those 5. Then I have another 5 some categories that are just for my own take. Those are the numbers that are going to populate the graph. So if you want to see the some categories, the data type.
The sum category has a type of like personal take versus colleague take. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. So I end up with 10 records. When I am created as a user, it triggers creating 10 some categories, 5 for user for self takes, 5 for colleague takes. These are the fields. It doesn't really matter, but like that's what it is if you want to see it. Okay. Back to the workflow. So that's the first thing that gets created. Some traits, we don't need to worry about that because it doesn't figure into the graph, but it is not creating itself all the time. So it's the same idea. There's a traits option set, and you're supposed to create one of those for each trait. And I want to say there's 23 traits. So one of those for all my colleagues takes and one of those for mine. So 23, that's 46. Okay. Same thing for competencies. We want to create the exact same thing for competencies. Okay. I think there's 18 competencies. So 18 for self-take, 18 for aggregate of colleague takes. So this is the first step in this. This is just creating empty things, right? That's not working all the time. It works sometimes, and then it doesn't work all the time. Okay.
So yeah, what do you mean by that exactly? Like, does it create the data records or does it not? Or how's that work?
Sometimes. So here's, I previewed this and that was a mistake. So let me just open that up. It was called Z test run workflows. Okay. So you can see this is sort of just a admin page, right? You can see here, look at this bit here. When it says total sum categories, this number that's not bolded, this number that's not bolded is the number that exists in the database. And this is the number that should exist in the database. So you can see like Claire, it created all those. She's got 10 sum categories, etc. So that's fine. But who was it? I think it was Matan. Created 0 sum categories, 2 sum competencies, and the right number of traits.
Okay.
It's just
so the first thing that I see for improvement is instead of scheduling separate API workflows for those things, really you can just use copy a list, right? Because you're just copying templates. So you can just say to copy the list, and then you can edit the list from the previous step to add the owner to it, like to add the user to it.
Wow. Okay. All right. Okay. So what you're saying is instead of, this is that first workflow, instead of create some category, I mean, I need to populate all these fields. So that would always be the same.
So you would create, right. So you would create 2 sets of templates for your some categories, because you'd have one for the users take and one for their colleagues takes, right?
Yeah.
So you'd have 2 sets of templates. And then in that very first workflow, you could say copy well, you wouldn't even have to, you would copy a list of things, right? So you could just take have an empty set that's called template of the some category things. And then you do a search for all of the things that are some categories that are templates, and you copy that list And then the very next step, you make changes to a list of things, and you're making changes to the list that you just made, and then you add the user to it.
Add the user. Okay. Okay. So question there, that makes perfect sense. Are you saying that in the sum category, I would have a field that says template and it's a yes, no?
Yep.
Okay. Template. Oh my God, this is going to be the best. All right. So yes, no. Great. And it's usually no. It's always no, except for the one that I create.
Exactly. Except for I think you said it's a set of 10, right? 5 for each.
Yeah.
So you'll have 10 that are labeled template. And then you can, and if you want to go back to your backend workflows, go into the initial one, the create new user stuff.
This one. Yep.
And then just at the end, click to add an action. And then just type in copy. Copy a list of things.
Okay. So basically, I don't need any of these.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. You can fit it all into one workflow. It'll be a lot faster and it'll be a lot more reliable because it's less than 100 things each.
Right. Amazing. 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 Okay. Oh, that's so good. All right. So copy a list of things. It would be a sum category. And then the list to copy would be do a search for.
Yep.
Some categories where the template is yes.
Yep.
Right. And then the next step is to update that.
Exactly. So data, make changes.
Make changes to a list of things.
To a list of things. Yep.
And it's going to be some category. And is it result of step 4? Currently step 4. Oh man, that is so slick. Okay. That's so good. All right. So then the user would be the user that's on this workflow. Oh my God. That is so smart. Okay. So I'm doing that. I'll have 6 actions in this workflow, 1 for each of the things I'm creating.
Exactly. And you'll be confident that they're going to run because step 4 will be step 1, right? So step 1, 3, and 5 can run independently, and Bubble will be able to create the list, copy the list, no problem. And then the other steps are referring to the results of those other steps. So I think it'll be a lot more reliable.
Now, I have heard that backend workflows run consecutively after they complete. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
Just say, in my experience, they don't tend to.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I was wondering if that was part of the issue. And I think for the calculations it is. I don't know where I heard that, but yeah. And the calculations rely on each other.
Right. Like you can be sure that if you're referring to the result of step 1, that step 2 that's referring to the result of step 1 will wait until step 1 is done. Right.
Sure.
But outside of that, Bubble tries to run everything as efficiently as possible. The other thing, if we were going to do this in a daisy chain or like a spoken wheel, actually, where you were like kicking off 3 other workflows, I would just schedule them out into the future, right? Like I would say, like, let's not schedule them all. Let's schedule one for like the first minute or something to let it run, and then the one and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. I thought I had done that actually, but I guess I didn't. I think I do that on the calculations. Okay. Awesome. So that solves this problem, hopefully, where it's not creating the right thing. The second problem is that it's not doing the calculations correctly. So let's see if I can give you an example of this. I know this probably makes no sense. Okay, so what you're looking at, this is just a list of users. You could ignore it. We've already talked about that. This over here is the calculations, the final calculations for the graph. These are some category records. And a field on both of these, okay? So this is auto-populated from when we create it, so we can ignore that. Amplitude is what we're talking about. So I need a number between 1 and 5 that's going to end up here, between -5 and +5, okay?
Mhm.
And that's what determines where it falls on the radius of the circle, okay? Strength versus weakness. All right, so the way this works is when I run the work, when someone makes a take, these down here are like an ugly version of the take. You can see I've got a list of strengths. I have a list of weaknesses. Sometimes there's only one. And this guy has like 4 takes or something like that. Okay, so each one of these, of course, would be done at a different time by a different person. So once I hit submit, it's going to do all these calculations. So when I hit calculate on here, it's as if I'm submitting the take. So if I hit calculate, you'll see these numbers. I think this is not a self-take. These numbers should populate. There we go. It's slowly happening, right? And eventually there will be numbers here, but they're not always accurate. They're always kind of like off. I don't know. Like there should be some negatives here. There should be like self-awareness is a category, -3, -3. So you should have a strong negative on self-awareness. That one almost never calculates for some reason. But the others sometimes do. So the calculation's a problem. I can show you how I'm doing that. Yeah, this one is complicated. Probably too complicated for sure. Okay, here we go. So I start from, I create a record for each competency that's selected, either a strength or a weakness. And I create a record for that in a data type called take numbers. Okay, so here's what that data type looks like, take numbers. We tell you the category, the competency, where it like rank 1 through 5. We can remove a take. So that's if someone wants to remove the take. Is it a self-take? Yes or no? Is it a strength or an improvement? And then we're ranking the degree, like it has a set degree and I have to like give it, ignore degrees. Some points is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then the take that it's connected to and the user. Okay, so that's the first thing. We create one of these for every single competency that has been selected. That's how I feed all that then into the categories. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go straight to categories and just compound the final number, but I found that wasn't working. So basically what I'm doing is every time someone makes a take, I'm clearing out the sum categories and then just doing a search for those numbers and like calculating the totals, if that makes sense. So first I have to create those take numbers. I create them for strengths. I create them for improvements. Then I calculate the sum traits. You can ignore that. I calculate the sum categories. That's next. This is pulling from the strengths and weaknesses. Again, this is referring to these other this green workflows. So calculate some categories. So these exist already, right? We created them when we created the user. So I make a change to it, which is the sum of points, which is the radius, where it falls on the radius, should be from -5 to +5. I do a search for all the take numbers. And then I'm summing each of their sum points. Okay. Same for degrees, which we can ignore. And then I've said the number of times selected. So this is search for take numbers where this category shows up. Count that, right? Because that then we have to take an average. So first thing is to populate these fields, which is just sums. Then we want the final placement, which is an average. So we've got that field, all those fields that we just populated divided by the sum, this category, sum points for this category. That's degrees, ignore degrees. I mean, it's also not populating, but we're not using it right now, which is why I keep saying ignore it. So this sum category is sum of points for the category, all the points that have ever been like calculated or given for this category divided by the number of times it has been selected. That's the formula, right?
Okay.
Okay, then if it's never been calculated, this is degrees. So again, you don't need to know that. And that's it. It's recursive. So it just keeps going through all of the categories, every category. Is that right? Every category. Calculate some traits. The takes selected. Sorry, wrong one. Selected, search for some categories. Yeah, it's all of them. Right. So I used to do it like whether it was self or not self in one thing, and it just wouldn't work. So I separated them out. But basically, I just go through all of the sum categories and run this workflow over and over on that list.
Okay. Yeah, definitely a lot going on here. First off, I just want to commend you. This app looks excellent. It looks like a lot of work put into it, and you definitely seem to know it very well. So hopping into it, as you can imagine, is crazy. But totally something that we can look at. So the issue is that these numbers they're not being created here.
They're unreliable. I'll calculate this one and then it'll work, and then I'll calculate the next one and it half works, and this,
So is it just calculating for each one of the takes when you click that calculate button?
Yes. Yeah.
And then this is who's clicking the calculate button?
This is never it's just when they submit the take, which happens this is just an admin thing.
This is
for
just
me to
an
test
admin
it.
thing. Okay.
Just for me. Yeah.
Just for you. All right. And then so I think the first thing I would do is go back into the backend workflows. Mm-hmm. I would daisy chain it. So what I mean by daisy chain is, right now you're scheduling all of those API workflows to run at pretty much the same time, and that's just going to break bubble. So what you want to do is schedule the first one to run, and then after the first one is run, if it's a recursive workflow, it can do its thing, and then it can kick off the next one when it's done. And that way you force Bubble to do things in the order that makes sense to get the results that you're looking for.
Okay.
Definitely.
I would love that.
Place to start. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then how do I do that? Because schedule date.
Yep. So the first one is going to be the trigger. And so the first thing you're doing is to calculate number strengths, which is which green one? Is it the one that's behind there?
It is numbers strengths here.
Okay. And then does anything depend on number strengths?
Yeah. Number strengths is the root of everything. So yes, it's critical that this is done first.
Okay. So then I wouldn't have the trigger one. I wouldn't have it schedule anything except this workflow.
Okay.
And then you would come in here and do all of the necessary things first before you trigger the next workflow.
Okay. So how do I do that?
What were you going to say, Cameron?
I was just going to build off what you had said and say that Bubble, like when we're triggering everything to run by itself, it becomes absolutely chaotic. It doesn't run as smoothly as it possibly could, regardless of what agency or professional plan that you have. It's just the way that it's designed, those limitations. But I did want to say, yes, daisy chaining and having the first go, and then after everything that's important is done, sending it to the next API workflow.
Do you want to see an example? I can show you an example.
I would love that.
So I'm going to use Ben's app. I'm sure he'll forgive me. Let's see here. So if I go to... He's trying to sign on, by the way. He's having internet issues.
Oh, yeah. He said he was going to be here. And then I was like, maybe he had enough of me today.
No, he messaged me. He said, I'm having a Tanya moment on Saturday. We lost internet for the day. It was no fun. No. I was like, what?
My God.
So,
jeez.
Yeah. He's like, I'm having a Tanya moment. I'm like, oh, I have to get back. Okay, so I'll share my screen. So this is Ben's app in his backend workflows. We're now working on a series of daisy chains, basically. So the first one being here is triggering it's making the API call, right? So we're getting a list of things, sending it into the API call, and then it's recursive. We're just scheduling it to work again. Now, if I'm in a recursive workflow like here, it's the same thing, right? So get the list and then make the call, and then make this again, right? So here's the first one, then it schedules the second one here, but it schedules itself to happen again in one day, right? And so what you can do, what's interesting is when you're running recursive workflows and you need the first recursive workflow to end, and then you need to kick off a different workflow, what I like to do, let me see if I can find an example of this where, so I like to do something, the count of one of the parameters that comes in is a list. And I would say when the count is greater than 0. And so then it'll run and run and run until the count is not greater than 0. And then at the very end of it, here, when the count is less than 1, I schedule a different one.
So you can, step 3 in this workflow is the iteration workflow, right?
Yep.
Where that's the recursive part.
This is the recursive, and it keeps doing this until it runs out of them. And then when it comes back and it's 0, this won't run, this won't run, this won't run, but this one will.
That will run. That's daisy chaining. Okay, I wasn't sure you could do that. Oh, man. Amazing. Okay.
I mean, your approach makes sense, but this is just a better way to do it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And this is,
okay.
This is the way you can force things to happen in the order that you want them to. Like you could even do that, like you could force those first 3 things, the lists that you're copying. You could have the first workflow get the first one done, and then schedule a second workflow into the future to do the second one, and then schedule another workflow into the future to do the third one, right? So you can have a lot of control over when things are happening. And you might do that if the user's not, like if they just click to sign up, they're not sitting there waiting for these things to be created, right? So you can take your time creating them, right? And and that will...
Well, one of the first things they do is write a take for themselves. So within probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes, if they rush through it, all these things need to be, the calculation. Sorry. Right. So my brain was somewhere else. When they hit submit, it does the calculations. They see one more screen that says, you did it. Go to your profile page and see your take.
Right.
So then they click on it and they should see the graph populated. So it needs to be done within like a matter of seconds.
Oh yeah, no, and that's totally fine because you're just doing the calculations for one thing, right? For one take. You're adding them to, presumably you're adding them to all of the other ones, right?
Well, no, because
you're calculating them over again.
Yeah. I'm basically clearing it out and then there's no step to clear it out. The step is instead of adding numbers or, adding stuff, it's just replacing what's there with do a search for these take numbers and calculate it all.
Yep. Okay.
And Bubble should be able to handle that. That shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, you could, this is what I meant by daisy chaining. So each one of these things follows in order.
Yep. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
This was a lot of things to make his app do in order, by the way.
Yes.
That all happens from one trigger.
Yeah. Well, it was going to happen overnight. And then I was like, this is a little crazy. So we moved to using an external tool called Bright Data that does all of the API calls and collects everything and then makes it available with an API call.
Wow.
So,
oh my God, that's crazy. So it pulls it out of the app and then pumps it back into the app.
Yep, exactly. So I trigger it here, then it hits this endpoint here. We get the information and send it
Yeah.
into this one for processing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Wow. 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 Okay. So for mine, I had them separated out as separate things so that I could isolate them one. Like I could see that like it didn't create all the sum traits. I can just create those. At this point, I don't care. I'll just still like I can do them all in one. But that was why I didn't daisy chain it, because I was like, well, I don't want them to all. I don't want a domino effect. I want to be able to target just those ones. But I can just keep those workflows, right? Like I can keep the ones that do that one by one if I ever need to have them.
Yep.
And then I just create one that, what you're saying is basically I create this, and then once this is done, so this is the recursive everything. Oh, but okay, I'll figure that out, because no, these are not copying from a list. These have to happen this way, pretty sure. But once this is done, then I can schedule API workflow, which is numbers, improvements, create, calculate, take numbers, improvements. So that would happen. Current date and time. The take is the take. Okay. How about this? Because the parameters or the keys, I guess the take, it's all coming from the take. So I'm saying takes, improvements, selected improvements. Right. Okay. I can do that. And then starts with iteration 1. That's daisy chaining.
So this is scheduling a different workflow at the end, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And then you would just want to make sure that you put a condition there so it only runs after everything else ran.
Okay.
So the iteration, I think you're using iteration like the count, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the way I have it, it's interesting because Ritesh was on office hours last night, and he was like, he didn't understand why I was doing the count is greater than 0. And the whole reason I do the count is greater than 0 is I want it to run through that one last time, right? So like run it that one last time so I can catch it at the end with something different, right?
Oh, okay. So instead of saying, if I want to run this, the number of strengths that I have, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what that was. We want this to only run, this one, to repeat it, to only run when the number of strengths is more than the iteration.
So the way that I typically run my recursive workflows is your strengths is a list, right?
Yeah.
Of things. So then you're looking for the item number that's based on the iteration in that list, right?
That's
so
right,
what I do is I would say in this, when you're scheduling the recursive workflow, instead of strengths, I would say strengths minus item, strengths first item. So I would knock off the first item off of the list and then always run the workflow on the first item of the list. So eventually it runs out of items altogether, right?
I think you just spoke some weird language.
Okay, let me show you. I'll show you.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. So if in my recursive workflows where I'm working with counts of things, like right here, the social media's profile count is greater than 0. Mm-hmm. So in here, I'm getting a list of social media things, right?
Yeah.
And then here I pass that social media stuff in to get something. Here I'm saying only do that when the social media profiles count is greater than 0. And here I schedule this to run again but I'm taking the first item off of the list, right? So I take the same list and I minus an item and I take off the first item. So then when I come back in here, I'm only doing the first item, right? So I run the thing over and over on the first item, and I keep subtracting first items until we don't have any more. It will run one last time. So it will, when I subtract this item here, this will run one more time because this is based on the condition of when it came in. So it'll run last one time and it will fail because it will be not greater than 0. So this will fail and then this will fail. But because it's less than 1, this one will run.
Because it's less than 1.
Right. Because
because it's 0.
Yep.
Right. Why don't you say count is 0?
When I first started bubbling, I don't know why, but the is 0 is the count is something didn't work for me. So now I just do greater than and less than.
I see. Okay.
Greater than 0.
I wondered about that actually.
It still hasn't worked for me as of recently. Within the last month or so, I was working on it.
I just don't trust it. Yeah.
Yeah. I would absolutely use this less than or greater than more than I would is.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Man. Okay. Wow. That is a completely different, makes total sense and would never have thought to do it that way. I just learned differently. Yeah.
I don't even know where I learned to do it, if I'm being honest. Like, if I go back, I'm like, maybe it was trial and error. I remember I spent a godly number of hours on recursive workflows when I first found them, but they're amazing. I love them. So.
Oh my God, they're so fun.
Yeah.
They're so fun. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to try all this. I can't believe I feel like I actually, I came into this going like, I don't know, man, this is too complicated to explain in an hour and actually get an answer. But now I feel I could do it.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. No, well, now that you know how to make Bubble do what you want, when you want, you'll feel like you're in a lot more control over things. And then you can always go in to the logs to figure out like what happened, right? So like I have, I ran a recursive workflow, 2 separate ones overnight, the last 2 nights for a client because he's a professor and his app is for his students. And so they just finished a semester and he needed to process their grades, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't ask for the particular processing that he needed until after we built the app and after the first cohort of kids went through. So I had to learn how to take the data that we had been collecting in Bubble and put it in Airtable. And so I do that with recursive workflows. And it took 21 hours to run one of these recursive workflows.
Oh my goodness.
It's 14,500 and something records what created one record every 3 seconds and I only had to restart the recursive workflow once last night. So I just would check on it and say, did it get it? Nope. Okay. I click the button and it would start over again. So yeah.
And when you do that, it does start over again, right? Like I've had stuff fail and I'm like, we got all the way through to the very last and then you have to start over.
So what I did was I built it in so that every time I created the new record in Airtable, it would recognize, it would make a change to the thing in the database saying, is it an Airtable? So then when I click the button, it would start the workflow, but only at the point where it stopped.
Yeah. Okay. That's so smart. Okay. One last question on this. I want to go back through all of the takes that have been added to the whole database. Because basically we imported, they had a V1 of this. There's a totally different Bubble instance. And so we imported all the takes, which were structured totally differently. We had to restructure them, blah, blah, blah. And now we have to calculate, right? So what I did was I basically ran that calculate everything on a list from the database, right? So I went to the takes app data, all my takes, and I showed all my takes. Can I just sort of show you how I'm doing this? Okay. might be more useful. So I go into my app data. I do it in live because we wanted it to be live, right? I find all of my takes. We've got 135 takes, so I make sure that they're all visible. Okay, here we go. I select, and then I bulk, and then I say bulk, calculate, calculate all takes submitted. That is the sort of first, that's the trigger workflow that triggers all of them, right? That's how I'm doing it. This was the thing that it would like come back. Some of them had done it, some of them hadn't. It would tell me the ones that hadn't.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I've never used this before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you pulled this up. I was like, what?
I love it.
This is the thing that I thought I saw it before, but I thought it was triggered somewhere else. So like I've seen someone else use this before. I've never used it. I always create I always have like a test page or a sandbox page. I just put a button and I just schedule it and send in exactly what I want. But I'll test that. That looks really cool. But
it's great for simple stuff. It
sounds like it's not doing. The other thing I did with my recursive workflow the other day, because the first time I ran it the last semester, it broke like 7 or 10 times or something. And so finally it was like, I was only doing 100 at a time. And I would get through 100 and schedule the next 100 and so forth.
Okay.
Just to break things down so it's not so heavy on Bubble. And I think Bubble does have a limitation with the bulk stuff. But one thing I want to show you in after hours, which I think if this is what we're going to talk about, maybe we'll just go ahead and move into after hours. So I'll go ahead and wrap things up. We're going to wrap up office hours. We're going to move into office after hours, which means we're going to turn off the recording. And if you want to see what happens in after hours, you have to join at pronocoders.com. And we wish you would, because we'd really love to see you here. Thank you, everyone.